That's always been a unique ability of mine, where I see like a complex issue, or I see something that's really hairy, and I look at it and I'm like, oh, okay, like just my mind immediately starts breaking it down into these smaller steps, which has just continuously served me well. I think part of it is my mind just looking for cheap dopamine as I'm going through like any task, whether it was in school or whatever. I'm like, hey, I might not actually be done with this, but I'm going to find a way to say I've accomplished something, right? And it's also a short attention span thing, because it's like, oh, I could put a bookmark in it right here, and then I can come back to it later and know exactly what's going on, right? So it's that mentality where then as the team has grown, I just started noticing.
Have you ever wondered how successful architecture, engineering, and construction companies scale their business?
Or have you ever wanted guidance on how to get more growth, wealth, and freedom from your AEC company?
Well, then you're in luck. Hi, I'm Will Forat.
And I'm Justin Nagel, and we're your podcast hosts.
We interview successful AEC business leaders to learn how they use people, process, and technology to scale their businesses.
So sit back and get ready to learn from the industry's best. This is Building Scale.
Hey listeners, it's Will here. Our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy. If you've ever listened to our show, then you know that the three pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology. So if you suspect technology is your weak link, then book a call with us to see where we can help maximize your company's IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
Today on Building Scale, our guest is Heath Robertson. Heath is the founder and president of VDC Specialists, an electrical BIM and VDC firm helping contractors build more efficiently through constructible models, coordination, prefabrication support, and field-ready deliverables. His path to entrepreneurship wasn't necessarily the traditional, if you will. He grew up in a small town in Kansas, spent time touring with a rock band, and eventually found his way into construction industry. Early in his career, he saw firsthand how BIM could transform the field when it was built around the needs of electricians, foremen, prefab teams, not just coordination meetings. And in 2018, with the support of his wife, he launched VDC Specialists from a spare bedroom. And today, the company has grown 3 offices, nearly 50 team members, projects spanning 27 states, including Canada. That's not a state. But it's Canada as well. VDC has supported more than 48 million square feet of construction, including data centers, hospitals, airports, stadiums, and other highly complex facilities. Heath has built the company around a simple belief: technology should serve the people doing the work, helping contractors plan better, reduce rework, and execute more effectively in the field. And with all that said, Heath, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. I appreciate the time, Justin and Will.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I ask you to give me a little bit more color on what I just said, you got to tell us the story about being a bass player, for a rock band touring in the Warped Tour. I mean, like, this is my like childhood memories of these things. So I got to hear more about it.
Looking back, it's a little bit surreal, but yeah, the way I grew up, the way I got here, it's just different, right? And so that's where I always say, like, the story of my entire life is a big like asterisk, results not typical. Okay, but so I'm from this tiny town in the middle of Kansas. Nobody knows what it is, but the town I grew up in, it had 1 bar, 2 churches, and a post office. That's the extent of the commerce going on aside from the farming. And so the odds of reaching any level of success, especially in an industry like rock and roll, the odds are kind of stacked against you. But that's where I just got really fortunate, had a lot of tenacity. And so basically all through high school, during summer, during breaks, I was on the road touring and made some connections to where then the minute I graduated high school, I already had a slot with this band from St. Louis called Building Rome. And, on the world stage, we weren't very big, but in my mind, compared to the touring I'd been doing, this is like the big time, right? And so we just got incredibly lucky. We had some great contacts and got to, do the whole rock and roll thing. We played Warped Tour. We got to play shows with bands like The Offspring. I mean, it was quite the experience, but the connection between that touring and where I am today has a lot more parallels than you might think. And the easiest way to say it is, like, I was not a great musician. I was barely good enough. But what really set me apart was I was very proactive in chasing endorsements and sponsorships and dealing with the management side. And so at the time, I had no idea how relevant all that experience was. But as I've gone through my business journey now, the parallels are so clear to me, and it all totally makes sense in hindsight. But I don't think anybody could have expected the course of action that's taken place.
The business side of the rock world, and
That's
now it's
right.
the business side of the construction world. So,
That's right.
for our listeners, tell us what you actually do. I feel like there's still a good chunk of the industry that is not exactly clear upon what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, for the average person on the street, I tell them what I do, and they're like, "Isn't that what the engineers do?" But I'll step back a little bit. So, the big picture idea of what we do is we make virtual 3D models of really big buildings before they go up. Now, we'll get a little bit more specific and say all we do is work with the electrical subcontractors on large projects. And so, while the engineers they have it laid out and like it's designed, sure, but as far as how it actually gets built, there's a really big gap. And as I'm sure everyone listening to this has heard, nobody is saying they have enough electricians on any other job sites. You know, everybody's talking about the skills gap and all that stuff. And so really, instead of relying on these senior people from these job sites to go home at night, mark everything up on their kitchen table with the plans rolled out using the colored pens and highlighters and all that stuff, we can basically figure out how this project is going to be built before a crew is even showing up to the job site. So that way, when they show up, it's just a matter of getting in there, executing. And then at the highest levels, it's enabling the prefabrication. So it's not even just nuts and bolts and piles of conduit laying around. You're getting big boy Legos that can go up in anything from 10-foot long sections to 50-foot long sections.
Wow. Okay. So you started this 2018 spare bedroom.
Yeah.
You're just working out of that. What did the beginning stages of growth look like? Where hey, I'm gonna start this business. What happens?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So basically, I was just wanting something to keep on growing, something to keep on pushing. And that's where my girlfriend at the time, now wife, gave me a really strong push to like get out there and go get them. So I was really lucky. You know, she was in her last year of pharmacy school. And so basically, we looked at the savings account and we're like, okay, if we start today, by the time we're going to be running out of money, you're going to be graduating pharmacy school. So worst case scenario, we don't starve. So that's a great starting point. And to that, like the humble beginnings, the idea was never to have 3 offices. The idea was never to have 50 team members. I really thought it was going to be a lot smaller. And so my goal day one was just like, I don't want to starve, right? Like I just want to be able to sustain, and, you know, just showed up with a strong work ethic. Our very first project was a BSL-4 containment laboratory, which if you don't know the BSL levels, picture an astronaut suit. That's what you have to wear inside, hooked up to the wall for oxygen and all that. It was a really highly complex project, and we were incredibly fortunate to land that. And so basically we open the doors day one, we get a contract for that. And then as time goes on, you know, the other electrical contractors on that job all want to work with us. And then the GC is carrying us to their next job. And so it's really funny because even though so much has changed since I started in that spare bedroom, I can trace back almost every single client and every single project to that first project and that first contract. So I take that as a huge compliment. You know, we're not marketing gurus. We're not anything like that. We really just pride ourselves on showing up, doing a great job, and then earning that word of mouth style advertising. And that's something that I take a lot of pride in.
So, first project, having a very complex project and executing on it, that helps, right?
Yeah.
So that sets you off, which means at some point you need to hire people. What do the first hires look like?
Man, so I distinctly remember interviewing for the first hire, right? And this first hire came in maybe 2 months into the business existing. And I'll use like heavy quotes on the business at that point because it's me and a laptop in the spare bedroom. But yeah, so I'm interviewing this guy. I think it's a great fit. And that's where, you know, after the second interview, I'm like, oh, holy smokes, like this guy probably thinks there's like an office or an actual like entity to be showing up to. And so basically I had to break it to him like, hey, actually, I just need you to understand that where you're going to be showing up to on Monday, it's actually my spare bedroom. And so that's the deal. And so it's funny. He shows up that Monday. Julie, my wife, is getting ready to go to school. So she's like doing her hair in the bathroom, and he walks in with a lunchbox and he's like, hey, where am I supposed to put this? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, you just find a spot. And so it was a really almost like humbling experience to be like, okay, I'm trying really hard here, but obviously all the pieces aren't quite put together. But then, it was very shortly after that, we got our first office space, which at the time seemed enormous, right? It was 600 square feet. Okay.
Wow.
If that's not big time, I don't know what is. And looking back, it's so comical, but at the time, it's just me and the one other guy, right? So it's like, there's so much room in this office and we're just sitting back to back in the office still, just like we had in the spare bedroom. But then as time goes by, suddenly we're like filled to the brim at that office. And so, that goes into the story of how we expanded that office, how we opened an office in Dallas, how we expand the Dallas office, expand back in Lawrence, Kansas. Ultimately, just a month ago in May of 26, opened an office in Wichita. And so it's just been a very slow and gradual build. But the absurdity of the whole thing is certainly not lost on me or any of the team members that have been with me since the beginning.
Wow.
I mean, it kind of sounds like you doubled in size every year.
Yeah, so we grow roughly, I think the number is about 50% year over year is our average. And, obviously that number was a lot easier to meet or exceed when you're starting off with one. And so for the first few years, that's pretty easy. Every year now, like recently I look at it, I'm like, there's just no way, right? Like it's not reasonable to think we can keep this up. And then we get to the year end and I look at it and I'm just like, holy smokes, we did it again, right? And I feel so fortunate. And it's certainly been a fun ride watching the team grow like that.
So obviously, you had lots of hiring experiences. Did they all work out?
Far from it. Yeah. And actually today, it's a funny stat. And so we actually hosted an open house for some like prime candidates coming out of local electrical technical programs, right? So we love hiring people out of programs like this or out of the field. And during this open house, I had a presentation. And my goal in that presentation was really just to do a reality check. And so one of the fun stats was that over 40% of the people who have left VDC didn't even last 6 months. And of that category, the average tenure was 104.9 days. It's pretty short. That's 3 months, right? And so that really speaks to how we operate here, where we're willing to give you a chance, but you really have to show up with the right work ethic, with the right attitude, and you need to be showing up every day because I can't train you on that stuff. You have to bring that to me. Now, if you bring that type of work ethic to me, we can do a lot with that and we can have a great time. We can teach you these technical aspects. We can teach almost anybody that stuff, but it's that work ethic and drive and the way you carry yourself that just cannot be taught. And so that's where it's kind of like an easy in, easy out system in that way. I'd love to find a way to make that number be a little bit less brutal. I'm sure there's room for improvement there. But at the same time, I also take it almost as a point of pride to where it's like, you know what? Our goal is to be a great spot for the right people, not to be a spot for everybody. And so, if you're not the right spot, it's okay. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It's just not the right fit. And so that's really how we built it. And then on the flip side of that, though, once you've been here past that 6-month mark, basically nobody leaves. And so that's kind of the silver lining in that, where it's like once you kind of graduate past being the new person, past that initial intro period, if you're here, you're going to be here a while, and we're going to do great things.
So you have to go through
That's
the
awesome.
hazing, through all the hazing, right? And then you make
Pledge week is hard at VDC.
Exactly.
So You mentioned from the field and from the programs. You said that's where you try to find your talent. Why not people that are already doing BIM and VDC stuff?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like, if you have BIM on your resume, you're almost guaranteed not to be hired. And that's because at VDC, we've built out such a specific way for how we do things. And it's really just to make sure that there is no extra slack in any of the process, right? Like, if these things are done excellently at step one, it directly feeds into steps 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through until the end. And there's also a danger in, because if that stuff isn't done, the process is so reliant on those preceding steps having occurred correctly that we get to the final steps and it really can mess things up, right? And so we found that instead of trying to beat bad habits or just other strategies out of people, it's so much easier just to find people with the knowledge of what actually occurs on a job site and then teach them that computer aspect, that technical aspect. Because let's be real, these are smart people, right? They may not come in knowing how to use a computer well. In fact, there's a solid percentage of these people where day one, we have to teach them how to turn off the computer, right? But we're not afraid of that challenge. We are well accustomed to training people from these rudimentary levels. And we just find that growth trajectory of bringing in people who actually understand the construction side, it's so much easier to train them on the computer rather than trying to train someone on the computer what it's like to be up in the air on a lift trying to reach over something or trying to install a complex system.
All right. So you're taking someone smart, not necessarily technology smart, right? They've not really had the experience with technology, but the experience is what you find is actually more important. So you're not taking someone that's, we'll call it fresh off the streets or fresh from school. You're taking someone with experience, but it's experience that's, you're essentially affecting the work of that experience in the real world, right? And so BIM, are you saying that anyone that's got BIM experience, they just have a bad imagination or like it's being taught wrong in school?
Yeah, I think it's just the way that, especially like for the electrical side, there's just such a lack of emphasis on the constructability aspect, right? Like if somebody's coming out of like the average engineering school or something like that, they might understand the NEC clearances for panels, but as far as like how to route conduit in a way that a foreman out in the field is actually going to want to install, and as far as how to truly do this multi-trade coordination, especially when you get down to the highly detailed scopes, right? Like getting down to 3/4 and 1/2 inch EMT, it's something so many people just want to brush off as being not important. But then if you walk on any job site and you look closely, you're going to see there's a lot of that small conduit. And if you ignore it, it can have big ramifications, right? And so that's where we just find it's so much easier, take somebody who kind of understands how these systems work. And then on the computer, everything is right there in front of them. We can show them. And then it changes that conversation from what should this be looking like? That's a whole can of worms, right? Whereas, these people who come in from the field, their questions are, I'm trying to draw a rolled offset to get around this. How do I do that most efficiently? That's a much easier conversation to tackle. And once you teach them, that's a tool in their tool belt. They know it, they can carry it forward. And so it makes that whole learning process a lot more efficient.
So what does training actually look like? So obviously you come in, I don't know how to turn a computer off. What's the timeline here that you go from that to being able to, let's do the BIM for a data center? That seems these are gargantuan leaps.
Absolutely. And that's where we really, really focus on making it be small bite-sized pieces. And so to directly answer your question, how do you go from how do I turn off the computer to let's do the BIM? That's a years-long process. Like there's no way around it. But that doesn't mean they're just sitting in a classroom in our office or just being lectured for that full amount of time, right? So first few days, absolutely. We just have to get them oriented with how to turn off the computer, how to open the programs, where to find certain things, and how to navigate. But then going beyond that, we really start getting them involved very, very early with simple tasks so that way they can start building repetitions and they can be actively involved in our projects. So sometimes that's as simple as ensuring that the appropriate circuit information is associated with devices, especially after things like design changes. That's something that doesn't take a rocket scientist, right? Like once you learn how to do a few clicks, you can see all that information and you can understand what's going on. And then extending beyond that, so now they can operate within the program. Well, if this guy has been hanging up lights in large commercial jobs for a while, he probably knows some of the nuance of how that happens. So, hey, we have these clashes with these lights. It needs to be turned into RFIs. Can you help draft those up? What's the proposed solution? What's actually going to make sense and what's the design team going to want to see, right? So that's another thing. And so basically we just keep on taking these small bite-sized pieces and we just stack them up every single day. So that way, if you ask these new hires at the end of every day, like, did you learn anything? They probably don't even notice that they learned anything because they're just being inched out incrementally. But then if you ask them a year later, what have you learned since you started? They're going to be like, oh my gosh, like there's so much, right? Like, where do I start? And then you ask somebody 5 years later, chances are 5 years later, they're running one of those hyperscale data center campuses, right? And it's just about, that slow and gradual growth. And that's really the beauty in it, is it allows us to keep on growing, to get the utility and make sure that we're not putting people in a seat that they're not actually ready for. So it just builds them up brick by brick. So that way, by the time they're put in the seat to be the one being a spokesman in a meeting, they know the VDC way through and through because they've had to live through every single aspect of it. We don't have managers or coordinators that just come in and get bolted onto the company, right? Like every single person starts in the same seat, whether you have a master's degree or whether you have a technical certificate or, an apprenticeship license. Everybody starts in the same seat so that way we can grow you the correct way, we can grow you the VDC way and make sure that we're all speaking the same language and pushing towards the same goals.
So with that amount of training, I would be concerned around at what point are they project billable, or like
Sure.
they're legitimately creating value for the organization. Because a year runway, you're basically paying for schooling. Like,
yeah.
Right. And so at what point or how do you know when they're valuable? Because if you said, so 100, it was about 100 days before they're either there or gone, right? And then 6 months, but at 6 months, are they actually producing value?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think it's really, really important to figure out how small of a bite you can chop certain tasks up into. So a lot of people would be like, hey, we need to model out the one line. You just go and you do it, right? Where our process for even something as simple and straightforward as doing the modeling of a one line is broken up into these micro steps. So step one is we go into Excel. All right, what is every single piece of gear that gets connected, right? And so then we're going into, okay, how many connections are there? What size is the conduit? So you don't even have to look at the one line anymore. So somebody can be effective in that very, very early, right? If you know how to read a one line, you can do that day one, the minute you know how to peck around on a keyboard. And so it's not time wasted because we directly feed that into our modeling process. Because then when we go to model, every single conduit on our jobs has a name, and we can know what is going on with that conduit, the wire, the ampacity, all this fun stuff because of that spreadsheet that was built out day one, leveraging that one line diagram. We do the exact same thing for branch. It just looks a little bit different, takes a little bit more finesse of understanding the home run groupings. But that's where I'm saying, like, the amount of steps that we take in order to get somebody built up is so small. So the one line, you start off, get it into the Excel format, then it gets marked up within Bluebeam. So that way there's a very clear picture of from A to B, you're going to have this many conduits that go from here to here. And then it goes into Revit. Finally, the thing that people actually think we do is actually like step 12 in the process. Then it gets modeled. So that way it can be coordinated and actually thought through and ready for then the prefabrication and all this great stuff that are kind of the side effects from having the great process to begin with. Does that make sense?
It does. And the other sort of concern I would have is when you're doing all these micro steps. So you're learning the process. I feel like you're kind of dealing with an intern in a way because you have some experience, but it's not necessarily with the applications. It's experience in the field, right? How are you managing mistakes, right? Because that's just human error happens. And especially with someone that's learning, you need to do it a few times before you have any type of mastery over it. I'm assuming there's no mastery here yet. At what point? So if there's no mastery, like how are you dealing with, you're essentially dealing with like engineering, like very like precision, right?
Yeah.
So how do you deal with sort of the human elements, especially with someone that's not really been in the technology, to just been out in the field?
Yeah, that's another piece of the beauty in having everything broken down into such small steps, is because the train can't run that far away within this micro step, right? So that's a big part. Another thing is our entire company is built around this cascade leadership style, right? So in order to be directly put in charge of somebody, we're not going to put you in that spot and hope that it works. We need to have seen it. And so basically we give that opportunity to all of our team members from day one. Have you been here 5 seconds longer than the other guy? Okay, what can you help him out with? Can you make sure that even if you don't know the answer, is he framing up his questions correctly, right? So that's a big element of it. And then also our offices, everybody works full-time in office from either Lawrence, the headquarters, from Dallas, our second office, or from Wichita, Kansas, our third office. Everybody's there Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. And the senior people are sitting at the back. And so that adds some value because they can stand up and they can just look over people's shoulders and they can see what they're doing. They can see how they're processing information. They can see how things are actually working, which provides a lot of value and catches a lot of issues. But all of that, if you're step one in the process, when you go to hand it off to step two, especially if you're new, we know we can't trust it, right? We know it's going to need some TLC. And so basically when that's handed off is like, hey, my part is done, handing off the baton, that review is initiated as a part of that step two. And so it really helps us prevent issues from falling through the cracks because so many people have put their eyes on it by the time a conduit is actually modeled that, the amount of issues that slip through are pretty minimal.
You have built quite the machine. Which to me, I love. I get a little giddy about this. So, how did this come up? Right? How did you realize if I break things down to such bite-sized pieces, I can have people that don't know this space or don't know the technology component of this space be effective and then grow through, and then have those that have already been here be able to look over, and then those that have been here longer look over that, and then it feels, and I don't want to say this because I feel like this is quite the situation. It feels very much like an Amazon. You've built the machine, like you've built the Amazon. Like this shit just works. I ordered it and it's here at 4 a.m, and I don't even understand how that's humanly possible, but yet it just works.
That's always been a unique ability of mine, where I see like a complex issue or I see something that's really hairy and I look at it, I'm like, oh, okay, like just my mind immediately starts breaking it down into these smaller steps, which has just continuously served me well. I think part of it is my mind just looking for cheap dopamine as I'm going through like any task, whether it was in school or whatever. I'm like, hey, I might not actually be done with this, but I'm going to find a way to say I've accomplished something, right? And it's also a short attention span thing because it's like, oh, I could put a bookmark in it right here. And then I can come back to it later and know exactly what's going on, right? So it's that mentality where then as the team has grown, I just started noticing, I'm like, wait, everybody's brain doesn't work this way? That's weird. So then it's like, okay, so how do I teach this way of thinking to people? And that's honestly been one of like the biggest struggles in my mind, or the biggest struggles as I've grown the company, is understanding that everybody is not Heath. Everybody does not think the way I do, and trying to figure out, okay, How can I leverage their strengths? How can I understand where they're coming from and know, all right, these are the things that have to happen, right? And then there's other things where maybe we can let them do it their way a little bit, right? Like, and so that's been a really big learning experience as I've continued to grow the company, and it's ongoing, that's for sure.
I want to go back to one thing you said. So, you had said that everyone is in office. So, are you completely against work from home?
For my team, yes. And I know that's a little bit controversial, and we've certainly lost certain team members because of it. But at the same time, like, there's been multiple times where I'm looking at what we pay for rent and I'm looking at like all these logistics and I'm like, oh my gosh, it could be so much easier if we just did work from home, right? But then I sit down and I'm like, okay, well, like the amount of interactions we get in person, the amount of issues that we catch from standing up and looking over people's shoulders, right? And also just the fact that when people are asking for help, it's a pretty rare day that they just shoot over a Teams message to the person that's sitting 10 feet away from them and say like, hey, how would you do this? It's just not the natural way, right? And that's kind of proven because 9 times out of 10, they're standing up. They're like, hey, can you help me out? And it's like, okay, so there's an element of that's missing when you go remote that I haven't been able to find the answer to. And then extending beyond my mind, that recognition, not everybody thinks like me. You know, I've brought it up to my leadership team multiple times where I'm like, hey guys, do you think we could do it? And basically they go back and they come back and they say, no, I don't think we can. So I'm like, okay, fine. I guess we'll get the bigger office. We'll sign the new lease. We'll do all this stuff. We'll just dump the money out. And so all that to say, like, I just think there's so much value in that collaboration. And then for our clients, I think they get a lot of security in knowing there's one phone number I can call. And by the second ring, somebody's picking up every single time. You're not going on a wild goose chase trying to find somebody. Like, you can get an answer right now when you need it. And it's not, just chase trying to find somebody to get that information.
I like the perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, we talked a bunch about your team of masters of the technical world. What about your leadership team? What does that look like? How was that built out? What does that look like today?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really funny, and the leadership team is so varied in their background, right? So the very first hire that I made is actually still here today, and he's our director of operations, which is pretty fun, pretty exciting. Going from the spare bedroom to now where we are today, I think we get a big kick out of it. You know what I mean? For him, he went through an electrical technology program and then worked out on job sites for a while before deciding maybe the office life with air conditioning and heat sounded a little bit more comfortable. And I don't blame him for that.
Absolutely.
And then, next up is a guy with his master's of architecture, right? And so I always lovingly refer to anybody with the architecture degrees or the engineering degrees. I lovingly refer to them as the nerds, right? It's like, oh, you went to college. Look at that. Like, I'm proud of you. But like I said, all that to say, they're not in the position they are because of where they came from. They're in the position they are because of what they do every single day when they show up. And even with that, it's not just a tenure thing. I always tell everybody when we're doing interviews, I do not care how long you've breathed oxygen in my office. That is not what is going to propel you. It's about what you can do and how you're carrying yourself that's really going to set you apart. So we have some that have been on our team for 7 years and they are not running projects. Doesn't mean they're not valuable. That's not a knock on them, but the fact that they've been here longer doesn't make them leadership. Conversely, those that have been here 3 years are who they are directly reporting to, right? And so it's just that thing of, it's really about what are you doing? How are you carrying yourself? Are you upholding the standards? Are you making the pushes? And that's what we reward. Realistically, it takes some time to learn the process, right? So you're probably not going to be running one of the data centers after you start, like 6 months after you start. maybe someday we'll find the next Einstein who does that. That'd be awesome. Totally open to it, but just realistically. But I mean, like, yeah, it's just a matter of how quick you can learn the skills is the only thing holding you back when you're at our company.
I also love your origin story because spare bedroom. When I came to Spot, I was in a basement, so I know that, and I'm part of the leadership team now. So I love that tale. That's my story.
Yeah, yeah. It certainly makes you understand how much goes into having these offices, right? It's so funny because we just got our Wichita office just opened up, and it's so funny because they were like, "Hey, we need dispensers for the plastic silverware," and I'm like, what do you mean? Like, you guys have windows, you have so much stuff, you have plastic silverware. What are you talking about? Like, you should be so lucky.
I love it when it started. Where do I put my lunchbox? To now it's like, well, we're gonna need dispensers for our silverware.
Yeah, exactly. Kids these days don't know how good they have it. I'm telling
you. Because you work in BIM, can you talk about what does good versus bad BIM look like? Can BIM be done poorly?
Absolutely. And it's something that we actively have to fight against so often, especially when dealing with new clients. So, good BIM, I'll start with that. Good BIM is leveraged to actually drive deliverables in the field, right? Like, it's going to directly impact everybody putting the boots on, the hard hats on every day. So that way their life is now easier because BIM existed. That's good BIM, and we can dive into that a little bit. And bad BIM is the stuff that only exists in a coordination meeting, right? And I think anybody in the BIM world has probably seen that, whether it was an entire job or whether it was just one subcontractor. Not to call anybody out, I'll keep it vague, but I think we've all experienced that, to where anything going on the computer, they're just like, oh, okay, we've done the BIM, we've checked the box for the GC, and now we're going to go out on the job site and we're going to install it the exact same way we always have. We're just going to figure it out. And the most painful example of that is when it's only one trade who does it that way, or a couple trades that do it that way, because you're scaling up, you're ready to execute, you're ready to bring in all these prefab assemblies, and then you go to install it, and that other stuff isn't where it's supposed to be. And in fact, it's right where you are supposed to be. And then it's a whole debacle as far as how you make it happen. And that's where, it really relies on a strong GC, honestly, most of the time, to hold those standards, to be like, hey, if we're doing this, we're going to hold everybody accountable. So that way people are incentivized to invest into the BIM, to do it correctly, to enable all this great stuff. Because it's a terrible impact whenever somebody goes rogue out in the field. That's for sure.
Do you feel like if a GC or if a builder has some poor experience with BIM, do they ever believe differently that BIM could actually be beneficial?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's something that I actively have to fight so many times when dealing with new clients, because if you've experienced bad BIM before, it's going to put a bad taste in your mouth. And especially if you're a foreman out in the field trying to drive crews and you're getting handed this thing and you're told to use it, but then it's useless. Like, it really drives a lot of resentment. And then it almost ends up being like a used car salesman kind of situation, right? I'm sure out there are really great used car salesmen who operate with integrity and they do the right things, right? But what do you think of when I talk about used car salesmen? Kind of, right? And so it's that thing. And then, once you kind of have that tarnished reputation, how can you possibly talk your way out of it, right? It's so hard because you have this negative experience and words aren't going to do it. Only actions will. And so that's where, I've always taught all my crew, I'm like, hey guys, the reason why these field guys can be so standoffish is because they haven't experienced the good BIM. So And conversely, after we give them that great product, there's so many of them where they're like, hey, we want you guys coming to our next project. We're taking you, like, I'm carrying you guys with me wherever I go. Or they're going to their next project and they're like, oh, wait a minute, you guys are coming too, right? I don't want to do this one without you guys. And so it's one of those things where, it's very easy to break the trust. But then again, like, if you show the value, if you show that, hey, I'm in here with you, we're pushing towards the same goals, this actually is being leveraged to drive better outcomes in the field, nobody wants a tougher job, right? Nobody wants to be less efficient. And none of these project schedules have any slack in them. And so if you can walk the walk and talk the talk, that's how you get all those recommendations. And that's really how we've built the business. So yeah, but having the bad BIM, I take offense to it, even though it can be a bit of a marketing pitch for us if somebody really nukes it. At the same time, I'm like, man, the reputational impact for the industry as a whole is so bad when it's done incorrectly that it really rubs me the wrong way when I see it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that's the car salesman problem, right? Like, it's just like,
Exactly.
attorneys get a bad rap. You got even contractors, people, like, especially with more residential, like how they
For sure.
view just contractors, right? Like, you can have such a bigger impact across an entire industry instead of just individual companies. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that makes sense. And construction certainly has seen technology, lots of software got early, 2000s pushing software. And then it's like, oh, none of these actually work anywhere near the way that they should for construction. So
Right.
then they, invest all this money, it totally fails. And then after that, anything that has to do with the computer is like the devil. And then
Exactly.
it's like, that takes 25 years to then like reshape the idea of this. So you're
Absolutely.
coming out of still seeing the remnants of that technology bad thought process to like, oh no, technology is going to be your savior. You will become more productive.
100%. And that's another thing about VDC that I'm really proud of is our focus, right? So we're not trying to be great at all things for all people, right? Like, we aren't Revit professionals. We aren't this or that. We work on complex electrical systems. And sure, we use Revit, but I always tell people, nobody says they're good at hammer, right? What are you doing with that hammer? And that's how I view Revit.
I am good at hammer. I'm going to write that
down. Justin's going to update his resume tonight.
Yep.
Good at hammer.
My
period.
LinkedIn title, I am good at hammer.
So, okay. Break it down for people or give some real live examples, because I think for people that have experienced BIM or have taken we'll call it the leap of faith, because that's really what it is.
Yeah.
That have taken the leap of faith to go and use BIM, and typically they're larger projects. Can you talk about return? Because I think any executive, especially non-technical, they're going, what's the return? I'm paying more money, right?
Yeah.
I'm paying more dollars, and I'm not even sure if I'm going to get a return. I don't actually even understand how I'm going to get the return. Can you talk about some real examples of like what this looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key word to kind of bridge that gap is investment, right? So you're kind of sliding up some of this expenditure earlier in the process in order to make later in the process be more efficient, which should lead to it being cheaper, more reliable, all that stuff, right? And so there's one hyperscale data center that we worked on a few years ago, and just kind of using this as an anecdote. It used to take about 600 electricians 3 years to get one of these puppies turned on. And then leveraging us in the process, it took 300 electricians on site the same amount of time. And so that's not totally cutting the manpower in half, admittedly, because there's a significant portion of labor that got moved into the prefab shop. But that's also where you can make a quality of life and a retention argument, right? Where you aren't out in the rain, out in the mud. You don't have people, not that this would ever happen, but bumping into stuff with lifts or falling into ditches or any of the chaotic stuff that can happen out on a job site, right? Like, it's a lot more contained in that prefab shop and more efficient. You don't have to have runners going all the way across the job to go get conduit or couplings or whatever it is, right? Less trips to Home Depot, all the stuff for the day can be right at that one workstation that is ergonomically positioned. So that way they are more comfortable. Like I said, they're not out in the elements, sun's not beating down on them. So they can crank out more work, and the oversight is so much easier because it's all contained, right? So that one super can oversee all these different activities. And it also just kind of goes into that factory mentality of like, okay, what I'm doing today is I'm bending this conduit. So that individual bending the conduit, man, by the end of their first day, they've probably bent more conduit than the average electrician will in a month. And you think about how much efficiency you gain from that, how much skill you gain from that to make them better and to make the whole process faster and more efficient.
I mean, you're going from essentially a construction process now to more of a manufacturing process, sort of hybrid, right? With manufacturing first, because that's really what pre-con or prefabbing is, and then moving into the construction site with larger assemblies rather than individual parts.
Exactly. And that's where I always refer to it as those big boy Legos.
Big boy
right?
Legos.
Sometimes it's branch racks of conduit that, they're 10 feet long. They're already mounted to the strut. So that way it just goes up into the air. Other times it's enormous duct banks with 20 some 4-inch conduits, and they're 50 foot long. And they're picked up by a crane to drop it into place. But either way, you have so many less activities, so much less material to manage. One thing that has been brought up by supers so many times that I never even thought of, there's like the amount of trash on my job site is way down. And on these hyperscale projects, just dealing with the trash is a whole thing to be thought about that never even occurred to me, but it's a big impact for them. So there's a lot of those impacts, not only to mention once it's all prefabbed, it's pretty hard to stray from the plan, right? And so you end up with a lot less examples of apprentices gone wild. If you go to get lunch and you come back and you wonder, what in the world were they thinking with that routing, right? Like, we got to tear it down and redo it. When it's all prefabbed, everybody knows before it's even built what it's going to look like. And everybody knows how it needs to go in, because it's not going to take you very many assemblies of installing it wrong to realize something was messed up and it needs to be fixed.
Oh my God, apprentice has gone wild. That's gonna remember that one. It's a good one. Okay, so we're preventing apprentices gone wild on the manufacturing, essentially on the manufacturing side. Does this, at what point or what type of projects would you say this doesn't scale well, right? Like, what size projects are we talking? So you're obviously working with hyperscalers on the data center side. And those are just big projects, right?
Absolutely.
Tens of, hundreds of thousands or even potentially millions of square feet. But there's got to be a size where BIM, the efficiency of BIM versus I'm not going to use BIM, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. How does someone recognize, should I be using BIM or, should I be using someone that, to help us out to be able to get more efficiency?
I think really where you get the biggest efficiencies is in stuff like conduit, right? And that's where the true BIM process is really going to pay dividends. So if you have a lot of conduit, so a lot, that's not really specific. I'll just tell you that on average, the electrical scopes that we work with on the small end are about $40 million electrical scopes. And then the big scopes on the electrical side are north of $1 billion, right? And those are those hyperscale ones, those huge campuses, battery plants, whatever it is. So that's a big range. But, I think what really sets it apart is the amount of conduit going on in the job. Anytime you have a lot of conduit, I think there's room for that efficiency, because getting those benders off the job site, getting that process standardized is really where it comes in. But I'm not saying that it's for all jobs, far from it. I'm not the person who's just like more technology equals good. No, I want the right technology being applied. But that's where you can look beyond BIM and just say like, okay, well, like, what can we prefabricate even? Because I'm a huge advocate of prefabrication. And that's when you can do a lot, even in tools just like Bluebeam, right? So if it's a light conduit job, if you can just standardize, hey, how high do our stub outs need to be? Like if we know all of our stub outs need to occur at about 12 foot, and we know we have hundreds of these duplex receptacles, you don't have to BIM that out necessarily to get the value out of it. You can have that stuff kitted so that way it can make your project more efficient without doing the full 9 yards. So I'm a big advocate of still trying to seek out those efficiencies, even if it's not getting that full BIM treatment.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked a bunch about the technologies you use for the outcome, right? For the services that are provided. But what about internally? Is there technologies that you're using to help? Obviously, you've scaled it a ton, right? In eight years, it's been bananas. So, like, you know, we think about people, process, and technology as those levers of scale. What does it look like internally for technology?
Man, so I'll kind of answer that a little bit differently than you might expect. And one of the best things that we built out was actually our training program. And what I mean by that is, like, for a long time, it was just like, hey, have somebody come up and breathe down your neck and tell you you're doing it wrong until you stop doing it wrong, you start doing it right. And then at some point we realized, we're like, you know what? Maybe the humans don't like that approach. Maybe there's a better way. And so it was actually one of those things of, like, you know, trying to take lemons and make lemonade. We had a little bit of a slowdown at one point, and sidebar, one thing I'm really proud of is I've never laid anybody off. So even through COVID, even through everything like that, nobody has ever been asked to work less than 40 or been fired due to lack of work. It's all merit based. And so when we have slowdowns, we really take a look at our internal processes and documentation and tidy those up. So during one of those slowdowns, we took the time to build out this insane training library to where we were taking those steps where we might have had like shaky guidance, where we were maybe just like recycling like old examples to be like, hey, do this, but it's actually totally different now and isn't relevant in any way. This is just kind of what it used to look like. I think a lot of companies have documentation like that. We took the time during that downtime to basically revamp our entire training process and documentation catalog to where on every single step of every single typical project, we have an updated version. And so it's been incredibly beneficial because we have a recorded walkthrough where it's literally like a screen recording with a narration of exactly what's going on. And then we also have a written walkthrough. And so that's really great because somebody's first time of doing something, before they even start, we're like, hey, watch this video. That's step one, right? Like, just understand what's going on. And then as they go through that process, then they ask a lot better questions because they already kind of know what the outcome is. They kind of know what the steps are, so they can frame up a lot stronger questions. And then if you've done it before, you just haven't done it in a while, you've got that written tutorial to where you can do the quick skim through. Oh yeah, these are the key steps. Cool, we're rocking and rolling. And so, like I said, we have probably 100 hours of those videos of just like every single step. How do you populate a device versus how do you populate a light versus how do you create, like, everything. And so that has been transformational in allowing us to train up a lot more people a lot more quickly with a standardized process. Lately, we've actually rolled out a new process where once you've mastered something, your job is to re-record the tutorial. And so that's a little bit self-serving because then as you re-record it, if you've actually done everything correctly, well, that becomes the latest recording that's put up there as that tutorial, which also means all those small marginal updates that happen over time are automatically captured. And then conversely, if you're doing something wrong, well, it's captured. And we can tell you at exactly which minute and second we kind of disagree or we want to talk about something. So it's not meant to be punitive, but it's really been awesome and just continuously feeding this thing so we don't end up with that outdated documentation. It's really, really made a big impact. And it's almost like a pat on the back for somebody where it's like, congratulations, your video is the new tutorial. Like they take pride in that and it makes a big difference.
rock star. You want to make sure that you're, hey, this is my video, not anybody
Exactly.
else's.
Exactly. Yeah.
You
You
can
want to
show
question how
mastery.
I'm doing it? I got the video.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, I was actually, as you were saying this, I was like, I wonder if there's a way to like track who has the most videos in it. You can have a leaderboard. You can get like a
That's
Dundee
hilarious.
award for this
That's
idea.
hilarious.
You know, that I don't know. That to me, that was where my brain went.
One thing we've also been rolling out on that, a similar vein, is we're calling them the Boy Scout badges.
Okay.
Maybe I can't say that, but basically, you know, like in the Boy Scouts, if you learn how to build a fire, you get a special pin, right? And like all these different skills. And so we've done a very similar thing for each step in the process, where once you've done something, you can submit that task for nomination, where then you get reviewed by the leadership to be like, okay, how well was this done? And so there's a do not give this person this task rank, right? Like bad, bad.
Yeah.
There's one where it's like, hey, you know, like they need a lot of leadership, but they kind of can do it, versus they do it pretty good, versus if I assign it to this person, I don't even have to think about it. It's done. And so it's great for the employees or the individual team members, because they kind of know where they stand. They have something to strive for, you know, for the right mindset. It's almost gamified to where they're like, how many of these things can I collect? For the leadership, it's awesome, because if somebody walks in at their annual review saying that they're the best thing since sliced bread, we're like, okay, sweet. Show me your Boy Scout badges. Like, let's go through that. Wait, you didn't nominate yourself for any tasks. So what do you mean you've been doing all things for all people and it's all this stuff, right? And so the other way that it helps out the leadership is when something comes in that's an emergency, you just need it done, right? Like you just need to know that you can pass it off. Well, you can filter by those tasks on like, who's the bee's knees at this? Or if it's something that's a lower priority, hey, who's somebody who needs a second chance at this, or who thinks they're ready? Because now's the time I can invest a little bit of time in them to get them trained up. So those couple of things on the training pipeline and on trying to show people a little bit of gratification, a little bit of like that gold star kind of thing. So that way they actually get that attaboy that can be very easily missed, has been really impactful for us.
It's a really interesting system.
You guys do, it stacks. It all stacks. It all, like, because it's not just we're doing this because of this one reason, which is great.
Right.
You know, that's awesome to have processes to get things up, but it's like, oh, no. These badges actually have a plethora of reasons why. Obviously, morale, like, hey, like the gamification component, review component. Who do I know can just do this without me thinking about it? Who needs the second chance, which is a training opportunity? Like I feel like all the things we talked about today and the things that you've built, they all have multiple reasons and they all stack on top of each other, which is unbelievably beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing all this with us.
Yeah, it's been a really big journey to get to this point, and it's taken a lot of looking at myself and realizing like, oh man, like I mentioned earlier, not everybody thinks like I do, and trying to appreciate that and think of ways we can get people brought in to have the alignment for the ideas, so that way we get a better outcome rather than me just being right all the time, because that's not the best way to do things. I found out the hard way.
Yeah.
But you were asking about technology, and that's where we also spend a lot of time obviously thinking about our tech as far as how we're working. I'm a little bit anti-subscription. And so a lot of things we actually program ourselves for the things that we're going to be using regularly. So anything from, for prefab assemblies and sheets, historically that takes people a long time. There's a lot of details. I mean, for our average data center, there's going to be thousands of prefab sheets, right? And so early on is probably 2020, I developed a tool that once we split out that conduit at the right lengths and the right configuration, we just hit go and it auto-generates the sheets. It auto-generates all the views that go on it, all the schedules that go on it. It auto-tags them, basically makes it to where my team just has to go on, make sure everything looks right, add some finishing touches, and then it's out the door. So we're always looking for ways to make our process more efficient without taking away the useful information, right? Like we're not trying to automate in a way that removes anything from the teams in the field. It's just like, how can we get it to them faster, more efficiently? Because as we mentioned, nobody's running schedules that have too much slack in them. In fact, most of the time you get a contract and they're like, congratulations, you've been awarded this project and you're late. So go ahead and try to catch up. Dang it, man. So just looking for any way to try to beat that.
As much as I would want to continue this discussion, we are at the top of the hour. I feel like we have so much more we can talk about. So we can only give you one more question.
Oh boy.
And it's Justin and I's favorite question because everyone gives like a different answer, like a completely different answer.
Okay.
So if you were to go back 20 years, what advice would you give yourself? What would you tell yourself?
My gosh. I've learned so many things the hard way.
School of Hard Knocks. That's right.
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely. I think I'll give you two answers. Number one is the power of focus, and that kind of extrapolates into those micro steps. And it really wasn't until I read the book Traction by Gino Wickman that it really clicked. But it's just the idea of like trying to be all things to all people, trying to have too many steps in a process. It just doesn't work. So having that clarity and like, all right, this is what success looks like for this one thing right here. And I just need you to really focus on that and be great at it. Makes a big difference because especially on these projects, it's a big beast to try to take on. So you have to have that focus for the individual task. And then the other thing I would say is don't focus so hard on having like a 5-year and a 10-year plan. I think a lot of people get stuck in their heads with that. And that's really the opposite of how I've always operated. I'm a firm believer that if you are doing the right thing today in the right way, you're going to be better set up for tomorrow. And that's not saying to be blind and don't think about the future, but it's just, again, kind of going back to that focus of just do the right thing with what's in front of you, and you're going to be better prepared for the next thing. I promise you. It's how it's always worked out for me. Because I know if I would have laid out a 5-year or 10-year plan when I started VDC, definitely wouldn't have looked like this. And same thing when I was touring in the rock band. If I laid out a 5-year plan, I was not going to end up working in construction, that's for sure. But at the same time, since I didn't have it all mapped out that hard, and it was really just about trying to capitalize on the opportunities in front of me, it allows me to just roll with the punches a little bit better and just walk into each situation with bright eyes and ready to go.
Super appreciate that answer. Hits more than you realize. I love it.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate the time, guys.
Absolutely. If somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what would be the best way for them to do that, Heath?
LinkedIn is a great spot to find me. I'm really bad at hiding, so feel free to look me up on there. VDCSpecialists.com is the website. We're always trying to keep up with posting updated videos about things we have going on, so we always welcome people to go there as well.
Awesome. And is there anything else you'd like to tell the people before we say our goodbyes?
No, man, I think I'm good. I just really appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully this has been beneficial for you guys and for the people listening. And I'm just excited to see what the next 5 years has for VDC as we continue our growth.
We're excited.
We're
Can't
excited
wait to see
it. Thank you, listeners. I hope you had just as good of a time as we did. And until next time, adios. Thanks for listening to Building Scale. To help us reach even more people, please share this episode with a friend, a colleague, or on social media.
Remember, the 3 pillars of scaling a business are people, process, and technology.
And our mission is to help the AEC industry protect itself by making technology easy.
So if you think your company's technology pillar could use some improvement, book a call with us to see how we can help maximize your IT and cybersecurity strategy. Just go to buildingscale.net/help.
And until next time,
Keep building scale.
Scale.